Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we have a new kind of perspective right here as I'm trying this new setup. Today, we just had the stream reveals. Now, we already knew all of the cards, so it's not like I'm gonna show you, oh, this new card with this new ability. However, what we actually got new was a ratio for what you can expect to pull in a box. They essentially opened up a box and we saw what they pulled. So this way, we know how much of a certain card you might expect to pull, how many of the big hitters, and this way we can also talk about how expensive OverDress as a whole may be. Now, one important history lesson here is that when V-Series 3 years ago was announced, everyone was suddenly going, "Oh, V is gonna be so much cheaper, everything's gonna be cheap. Man, decks right now on pre-order, you can get them for $80 or $100, so now decks will be $100. V is just, it's gonna be so amazing and everyone's going to get all these decks for cheap." One of the big arguments then was, oh, we no longer have a G-Zone, so it's going to be so much cheaper because no G-Zone. The thing is, you don't have to think about how many cards are in a deck. Even though in the short term, that may have effect because you just need less cards overall. What's actually far more important is how many specific cards of a certain case you need to buy. Because if you have a store, you still need to buy those boxes at the exact same price and you need to keep the profits at the exact same height. It's not like local game stores are a charity. So when people were saying, oh, all these decks are going to be so much cheaper, I was like, no. Look at your case ratios, look at your box ratios. Nothing's gonna be cheaper. You still needed the same amount of expensive cards, and they didn't add way more chase into the cases for the whales. Because if you don't have chase cards in your sets, guess what consumer is actually paying for the case, for the store, to still have the same profit margins? It's gonna be you. So when I saw V, I realized this shit is gonna be the exact same price after a while. You still needed the exact same amount of high rarity cards, and so you needed to hold the same cost. Except for, that is, those GRs and ZRs that we had at one point in G. But beyond those, everything stayed the same. And so what did we see? Mid and end of V, all of these decks were just as expensive as G, except for, once again, the weird outliers. So now we get the ratios for OverDress, and now we can start talking about how much cheaper or more expensive will OverDress end up being compared to V and compared to G, basically comparing to Vanguard's entire life. So, what was the ratio in this one box? And now I'm not saying that every box will be like that, but the box we saw here was we saw 1 SP, which is confirmed per box. You will always have 1 SP. We had 4 triple rares. That's really huge. We had 5 double rares, 5 holo, and this is very important, and 1 over trigger. So I think it's also confirmed that we have 1 over trigger per box, but the really important ones here are the 1 SP, the 4 triple rare, and the 5 holo. Because when you have 4 triple rares, that actually means that you will almost be able to build 2 of a deck per case. Not exactly, but kind of. Now again, you need to assume that the value that the store gets out of a case needs to stay somewhat consistent. They're not gonna pay 500 to 700, however much they need to pay depending on the country and taxes, let's say 500 to 700, to then pull $300 worth of cards out. That is just not happening. Unless you're at the later part of V where all of the demand plummeted. But in general, when your game is doing fine, the values need to stay somewhat consistent. So by looking at this 4 triple rare system here, I'm going to assume that building decks in OverDress will actually be slightly cheaper than in V. But we're not done yet. We have other factors. First of all, we have way more SPs per case, but there's also way more to choose from. So if you are chasing for 4 copies of a specific card, it will probably be just as hard as before, or maybe slightly easier, but it won't be, this home run thing, because there's still a lot of SPs that aren't the chase ones. But since you are adding an SP per box, this means that a store will once again get more of their margin out of a whale, someone who's willing to overspend for cards, and that way that should push down the prices of your regular cards, your non-max rarity cards, a slight bit. You basically always need to consider, if there's a chase and the chase is actually worth it, the other cards should go slightly down in price because people like, well, me, essentially pay for your decks. That's how you need to look at it. If there's a case of $700 and there's a card in there that's 10,000, all the other cards are worthless because the 10,000 will by itself pay for the case. Now, of course, such inefficiency would not survive forever, because then, well, that would be free money forever, right? So that's not how life works, but it's a really easy way to understand what's going on. Now, SPs, we've always had that. And easy triple rare ratios, we didn't always have that. That isn't mind-blowing either. However, where we really have this massive paradigm shift in basically pull rates is at the holo level. That is something we've never had before. We have had SPs and GRs and SGRs and SSPs and SSSSSSPs and Boombi Bambi Boombi SPs. We've had plenty of that. But what we never had was lower level cards being bumped up in rarity so you can basically shine out your deck entirely. That is a new concept altogether. This has been a thing in Magic and Pokemon, and so now also in Vanguard. I believe that this will also push down all of the other prices, because once again, whales will be paying for your cards. I will not be competing with you for regular rares when I can buy the holos. I will not be competing with you for commons when I want the holos. And there's people like that who will gladly overspend on the holos, and that way the stores and the distributors in turn get their margin out of those whales, and thus they are able to sell everything else at a lesser price. Now, am I saying they want to sell those at a lesser price? No, but other stores will feel inclined to sell at a lesser price to be able to sell their stock, knowing that they're already profiting of the holos. And so this kind of like supply and demand shift will basically make it so the new SP ratios, the crap ton of triple rares, and these new holos should make base rarity cheaper than before. Now I already know what you're thinking. Oh great, all the decks will be free. $50 decks for everyone. Well, wait. If a deck is amazing, you will still have more demand for it. So you don't have to assume that every deck is now going to be dirt cheap always. You know, the best deck will still be the best deck. And therefore it will still have loads of demand. You may sometimes have a fan favorite. You may sometimes have a waifu tax, an edge boy tax. I don't even know. But that can still happen. Regardless, the baseline, the general market should be cheaper, because whales are paying for all of this bling. Hope you found this interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.